Okay.
Hey there. It's a wonderful
Hey.
Wednesday here with Ricky, and we're here with Kim Strickland today, one of my favorite people, honestly. Um, and Kim has volunteered to cover the topic with us of Vedic Valens and ancient
Yes.
Hellenistic astrology and what the astrology looks like in that culture versus the culture of today. So, Ricky, we're in for a traditional classical ride today. Now, Kim and I have read a lot of Vedic Valens
Oh,
together. Um,
right. Right.
Ricky, have you read Valens?
Just what I got from you. So I've read a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, Kim, what would you say the culture of Valens is in general, or like what's his personality like?
Uh, I was thinking about that. I've got the number one book of yours right here.
Oh, nice.
And anyway, one of the things that I noticed that is that he um, he lives astrology. And what I mean by that is that I went back to this book here, and I said, I'm going to uh, read this again because, and I got started. It, I could hear your voice in it, the translation.
Hmm.
Okay, and it just seems like um, he he was. Well, his astrology is totally different than from today, and he looks at Mars different, looks at Saturn different, you know, and today it's everybody uh, is trying to be positive about everything, and he's just like the old guys, No, Mars is pretty rough. I'm sure you can make it that way. I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but
Absolutely.
yeah. But today, uh, well, I look at a chart now, and I've looked at. That's what's fun about astrology, and you don't have to be an astrologer. You can just study it, and it's fun. And if you study different people's charts, their natal charts, uh, you see fate where today we don't look at it as fate. And I look at it as fate. And I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, so what I
But
hear you saying is that, first of all, and we can read from Valens about Mars because he has a brutal take on Mars, and I think the point
yeah,
you're making is really a good one, which is the Hellenists were very faith-based, and they were very real about the negative indications of malefics, whereas the posi-core modern astrologers are like, oh, everything can be good and nothing is bad, and like
yeah.
so.
It's not that way. I mean, that's why the Christian church has gone down hills because they everything Jesus is going to take care of you and everything like that. But all I see out in the world is negative things. Uh, I, that's the only other word I can find, negative. But um, it's false hope,
Mhm.
and
It's like being
now,
toxically positive.
yeah, yeah,
So
and
Ricky,
like,
okay.
go ahead.
Well,
Well, one of the things that I know, what I have is I have a retrograde Jupiter in the eighth house, which is a cadent house, Cadent. Okay. And that cadent means it's in its weakest position. Okay. And so reading books like this, like my son is in a cadent house. And so my son is trying to Jupiter. Okay. So it's just not this great, everything's going to work out great because my son is trying to go to Jupiter. It's one is Jupiter's retrograde, okay, which is in a weak spot. And two, is that the sun is in a weak spot, or the house it's in is in a weak spot. It's in a cadent, and that's something for people to look up. Well, what in medical astrology, what does Jupiter rule? And it's one of the things is the liver. Okay. And I've got cirrhosis of the liver. And just in a minor way, but it's still there. But the thing about it is, and I don't drink, I mean, I want to sometimes, I mean, everybody needs a beer once in a while, but I could look at somebody's chart and just say, well, they probably just won't make it,
Yeah,
and
you're actually, can I speak to this? You're making
yes,
a really good point, because it's like, the modern psychological astrologer would be like, well, the sun's in a succeeding house, the sun's in a cadent house, and there are good things for this, and the fate-based Hellenist would be like, your sun is weak, it will be underexpressed, it will be undermanifested. And that
right,
is one of the cultural differences of Hellenistic astrology and modern astrology.
right.
Now, Ricky, what do you know about this, or any thoughts from you?
Hmm. Oh yeah, I have a whole lot of thoughts about this. Uh, and the first one I think starts with the first comment is about someone who lives their astrology.
Yeah,
And to me that's the root of it, because if you're living your astrology, then it's based in reality. If you're talking about the potentials and the possibilities and how great something is, right, that's up in a different kind of realm. And at least the way that I practice astrology is that I live it, you know. And I'd
yeah,
say relative to Mars, it's easier for me to embrace the real life, the reality of Mars, because I was a professional football player, you know.
yeah.
And he has
And
Mars
so
in
I can
Aries.
see both. Yeah,
What
John
ha-
Venus, and so I can appreciate. All right,
what
go ahead.
house is in your Mars in?
In the eighth house.
Eighth house. Okay. All right.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so you're expressing Mars full on.
So well, and I'm saying, so for me, because a couple of things. One, because it's important for me to live my astrology, and I think that's the choices I make, how I think about things, how I understand my past, right? And a big part of my past was in a very Mars environment, and I can appreciate the wonderful things, but I can appreciate the brutal realities of it, right? How many
Right.
scars, surgeries, you know, because I embraced it, right? I was proud, right? War wounds. I was proud of the Mars. So I think
Yep.
the nuance here, I think the nuance between the past and the present is, I think maybe we have more freedom to reframe our relationship to Mars.
Right.
It's like if someone is drafted into the military and they're forced to fight, they don't really have the right. It's more challenging to have the freedom to feel like they have the freedom to frame how Mars is showing up, for them.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays we have more freedom to reframe how we're going to handle, process, make the whatever, deal with, heal from, whatever,
Right.
whatever our relationship to Mars is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what Valens would think of today if we brought him forward, because hey, let's just say there is progress. Okay, we do have Pluto, we have Neptune and Uranus, and so I think he would probably uh, maybe change some of his views, you know.
Okay,
And
sorry.
go ahead. No,
Let's
no.
read from Valens about Mars really quick. Okay,
Okay.
so Mars signifies our bodily strength, and thus the star of Aries can bring about battle of all kinds, including robbery, fights that involve shouting and shrieking, and grievous assault of the kind that might bring about a more intense kind of injury. All sound like football to me. Okay, Mars can bring about adultery or the removal of one's belongings, banishment situations. Ricky has totally been banished from all of football. Um, isn't it so healing though, Ricky? Isn't it so healing? Okay, such as shipwrecks or other situations in which the native must flee and hide out, or go into exile or flee from the country. This happened to Ricky.
Yes.
but
This,
but
this is, oh, go ahead.
but Ricky, remember your sun is the ruler of your chart.
No, but don't you find this to be extremely healing, Ricky, when you hear
Yeah.
the reality-based version of Mars and all these things have actually literally happened to you?
All of them. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were legit banned from the NFL.
Yeah. Couple times. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think the watered down nature of modern psychological has its healing powers, but there's also something very healing about the realism of Hellenistic astrology and that the culture
Right.
there.
Right.
I think the bridge here to me, and this is where I think of the future of it, the bridge here is we have the capacity now, we have the language, even generally, right? The general public is starting to have the language to be able to psychologically understand why Mars leads to these things. Or not even why, but how Mars leads to these things. Because this is culture, right? All we can recognize is how Mars is expressing in a certain time period or a certain culture, right? In different time periods, I think of the Vikings, and I feel like the Viking culture had a very unique relationship with Mars. This idea that you go to heaven if you die bravely on the battlefield.
Valhalla.
Right?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Rome
that's
too.
yeah, exactly. Rome too, right? And so you can see that how it expresses in different ways. And I think in the Aquarian age, or more now that we have more freedom to be whoever we want, I think it needs to be matched up with the understanding of the different potential ways that Mars can express.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, then we can work with it. We can put it in the right place. Because if you, right, all of those stories, right, some of them cost me millions of dollars, right? But in order to have the millions of dollars to lose, right, the millions of dollars came from the Mars stuff. So
yeah. Okay. But you would be given a more true or a more this is just what's going to happen. This is your fate, and you can just accept it. What is Eastern religion, but accepting things.
yeah,
even Carlos Castaneda talks about you got everything you need. You just have to accept your fate.
Yeah. But I think I don't think it stops there. I think that's actually where it begins. Because if someone doesn't accept their fate, they can't live it. My app, I call it Leela because it's the divine play. But most people in this context are living more or less a nightmare because they haven't accepted their fate. Once you accept your fate, you allow yourself to start to turn the nightmare into something that'd be very interesting to watch. Right?
And that's where you
it might even win awards.
Right, and that's where astrological magic comes involved.
Yeah.
Is that we maybe Mars is not quote unquote a localized spirit, okay, or a god. It's an idea, okay, and you can make sacrifices to Mars in a sense of you're, Mars is not real. I'm talking about Mars as being in head, kind of. Does that make any sense? But you can give over because you are Mars.
Well, and just to add to what you're saying, Kim, I think one of the ways that they looked at fate in the Hellenistic time was that it's a fate we're here to partake in. It's not just a fate that happens to us. There was something called Moira, which was the degree of a planet in your chart is a Moira. A Moira is a degree, but it's also a fate you're here to partake in. So we could say Ricky is here to partake in the fates of the 28th degree of Aries, where he battles and shrieks and shouts and gets banished. That's one of the fates he's here to take part in. And if we don't accept and look at it, he's absolutely right. You're not living your life path and purpose. You're not.
Right.
And so that there is something very important about accurately delineating the fates so as to partake in it.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And see, I gave up all my beliefs. Okay, now I'm also evolutionary astrology, but I gave up all my beliefs, and I got to the point where I am not going to be defined by my beliefs. Because where did I get my beliefs? Probably from somebody else, And but anyway, if I was my point is that I'm a deist. In other words, there's got to be a God. I mean, this universe is too complicated not to be having a God. But deists believe that he's like a watchmaker. Okay, so what it is he wrote the software and the program and everything else, and then just walked away and let it happen. There's angels, demons. He put all that stuff in there, and but I'm also an absurdist, and so that's where the astrology makes it where I can. How absurd can I get?
You can get pretty absurd, from what I've noticed.
Yeah, I know.
And being an absurdist
Yeah.
would be fun as an astrologer because people are absolutely nuts, though. I mean, like when you really look at their charts, they are just.
Yeah, I don't have the love of Jesus in my heart most of the time.
Well, and so you bring up a good point, though, about the gods, the reverence of gods in Hellenistic time versus now. I mean, I think they were probably in some ways multi-theistic in as much as they looked at the planets as gods. But then the Bible, I guess, would say you're supposed to look at God above all planets, and that's why being an astrologer was a little bit sacrilege, So,
Yeah.
I mean, how does that compare to today's culture?
Well, most people, I mean, most people in the West are monotheistic. And I think it's just inherited. They don't really know what monotheism is, where it comes from. Now, that's sort of too generalized. But the thing is, though, is that I try to get away from monotheism, and not that I'm going to go and be a pantheist or something else. I'm not going to try to replace it because I just made it easy and just say I'm an absurdist. There's just there's no point, and
You must like us then, since we're so absurd. Hey, Ricky, what do you think about the monotheism versus, multiple deities thing?
Well, I think it's interesting that and you mentioned briefly that the Greeks looked to like the planets, in so much as they thought of them as gods, right? And I just want to note that they're named after gods, and so every time they think about the planet, they have to think about a god. So
Yeah.
it's implicit. Yeah, and also that before astrology really took off and spread to Greece, that it was in Mesopotamia where also the planets were named after gods. And interestingly
Right.
enough, each of the cities had their own gods that had the same name as the planets. Okay, so so and I think then we saw that they went from Mesopotamian gods to Greek gods to Roman gods, and then when we got into the age of Pisces, where we saw the monotheism really thrive, okay, then astrology, the planets got stuck in polytheistic, right, Roman gods, right?
Right.
And so I think through going through the age of Pisces, we did inherit monotheism, but we don't believe in God. And so I think this is why it's dangerous, because when I hear monotheism, at least in the West, I just think of the first thing that I saw was dollar signs, okay, and then I saw just more in general materialism.
Yeah.
Because we have a template of how we have to believe in something, and we've inherited what we believe is one thing that controls everything else, but we don't believe in universal order. We don't believe in God. So I think it becomes problematic, right? Where I think astrology helps, or at least where it's helped me, because I grew up very, very Christian, so I can think of a sense of order, right? That there is one God, a watchmaker, right? And because I have studied astrology, right, I can perceive with my own eyes the hands of the clock, right? The hands of the watchtower maid, and I can have a real lived experience, right, of both polytheism and monotheism, right? Realizing that there is one, but it manifests through different forces.
Right.
That's kind of how I always call the planets the GAWDs, like the God, like, oh my God, it's Mars, like, but like then there's like God above who like created this clock. That's exactly how I'm a full-on Christian astrologer, and like I definitely think that the planets are also gods, and it's both.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kim, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, no. See, the thing about it is that if you're of the mindset that nowadays they've been fighting about words, like in the Bible. What happened to Jesus's father? Did he get saved? He's nicer now, And what it is that they nowadays a lot of people are getting away from Yahweh, okay, and finding more about Jesus's father was the source, not because Yahweh could be an alien.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really out there. I mean, it's crazy as heck.
Well,
yeah,
okay.
really. Anyway.
Okay, so I want to turn the conversation a little bit, because we've covered a few things that are very interesting, and let's talk about something here, which is, how is the culture of astrology different when they didn't have computers, and they like I learned from Valens was to look up. Like really, after I used to Valens, I just kept going outside and looking at the moon cut in half and all this kind of stuff. Or they'd be like, the ram is rising, like they're just so different. So how is it different to culturally be looking at the sky versus looking at a computer screen?
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch that. I want to talk about this in a couple of different ways. Well, one, another comment that was made earlier about you don't even have to be an astrologer, that it's fun. One of the things that I've realized about myself today is that I am an anti-astrologer. Because from my own experience and my experience of talking to people, no one can appreciate your chart better than you can. And so, and so, and I think we had to have astrologers in the past, and thank goodness, because it kept the lineage alive and somewhat vital in growing. but I think we're in a time now where we have to actually start to live it and start to embody it.
Yeah.
And I think and because we have access to technology, that yes, we can go outside and look up, but having the technology to know where to look, right, and what to look for, that now with technology, everyone in the palm of their hand has access to better information than the first astrologers had, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
we have access to what's going on in our own lives. We have access to what's going on everywhere in the world. And we have this tool to be able to like utilize and have a personal relationship with. Oh man.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think, and my hope, my goal is again that all astrologers, the way we think of them, are completely eliminated, and everyone starts to have their own access to whatever
Yeah.
astrology can offer.
I agree. I agree on that. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Valens, I bet old Valens would go crazy if you introduce him to the computer today. He'd say, "What?" you know. I mean, because people that can do charts without the computer, I always think that they're great, you know. But if I had Valens come forward and just like Ricky says, you know, you use the computer today, oh, he'd go nuts. You know, I'd get the biggest thrill out of that.
well, and a few things about that. One is with computer technology has come a lot of noise. In computer programming, you
Yeah,
probably have heard the term noise, Ricky, where, you know, computer programmers get all this data and what they pluck out to put into their program is important, and then everything else they call noise. Well,
yeah,
astrologers need to learn how to deal with noise now that we can see all this data. It's like, oh, where do I look in the chart? No, it's just a big thing, as you know. And so I think
Yes.
in Valentine's time there was less noise because in order to really get a chart, you had to like someone had to journey to the oracle, and then they were like, hold on one second, I have noticed that this is rising and the Mars is red, and you know, and then they're drawing it, and there's a sundial, and like, you know, they had much less noise at that time. And also, there was something very magical about looking up and seeing the chart. You know, it's like the three stars of Bethlehem or whatever. It's like
yes,
the stars are here and the baby Jesus is born. Like that is magical.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
looking at a computer, and I'm sorry to harsh your computer, Virgo rising mellow. I'm Pisces moon. We're Pisces over here. But it's like astrologers'
No,
job.
no, we'll go back and forth. We'll go back
Okay.
and forth on
Okay.
this. This is
Number
good.
one, our
Yeah.
job is to be magical, I think. Okay. And so it's like, you know, staying magical in a computer age has been a little bit of a challenge. I'm sorry. There's a lot of astrologers where I would never get a reading from them because they're like, so anway, like on this computer printout, like I'm just like, like this is
Yeah,
like, I
yeah,
feel like I'm at the
yeah.
freaking library right now. So like
Yeah,
staying magical with the
100%.
computer situation is a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, let me a couple of things just to note because I just want to put this on the record of the Star of Bethlehem, blah blah blah. And I was on my car yesterday and I was driving and I heard on the radio the announcer talking about that there are 6 planets that are visible in the sky at the same time. And a lot of people knew I'm an astrologer. When they hear those stories, they say, "What does it mean?" And the answer that popped in my head as I was driving was, it's significant for the kids or the people that are born at this moment, and it was like a magical moment. Okay. Number 2, it's the idea that I agree that astrologers should be magical, but I think if you're just talking about the astrology, you're not magical. If you actually live the astrology, then you become magical. Because I think the power to me of an astrologer isn't the words that come out of their mouth. It's like they live it. So it's not just words, right? It's wisdom, right? Writing on top of the words.
Yeah, like
Right.
having more access to more charts, you can live the astrology with more people. You know, it's like I can run thousands of people's charts just having gotten access to their charts through astro.com. Whereas Valence probably had, I don't know how many charts he had, but he
Uh,
didn't have thousands. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying?
But
So,
also the other point, sorry, the other point that I wanted to make about looking up, okay, is it's the same to me. It's the resonant, right? It's the same experience of looking up and seeing a synchronicity, right? Or if you understand some of the astrological language, you look down and you read about something that is a synchronicity about what is going on in your life. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? It's the system of synchronicity, of noticing something going on there that resonates with what's going on in my actual life. But if you have access to not reading the printout, but the awareness of what are the celestial synchronicities aligning with what's going on in your own life. Right? Because to me, it's not about what the astrologer says should happen. And to me, it all starts with, wow, I noticed this today. I noticed that I'm really anxious when I'm driving today, right? I noticed that I'm fighting with my partner more this week, right? I noticed that my kid is acting crazier than normal, right? And then we look at, right, we have access to see what is going on in the sky, and it can help us make sense of what's going on. That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
That's our new term.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, Kim, do you have thoughts here? We're going off.
Yeah. No, back to the Mars thing. Mars in the 8th house, if you don't mind me saying, Ricky. In other words, other people can just get on your nerves.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and that the magic part about astrology is having a real robust vocabulary. You know, and because like I know a friend of mine, he's a traditional astrologer, and he could just look at your chart and say, hey, you have a rough life, but just look at it like this, there's reincarnation, just go through your lessons and benefit from it. That's all I want to say.
Well, okay, so Ricky, one thing I want to talk about with computers versus not, sorry, Kim, I have to say this before I forget, is there's a different level of specificity that I feel like we have in the modern day, whereas in the ancient, there was more swaths. Like this is where we get like the whole sign houses versus other house systems and things like that. Like, it's like they would even rogue out an ascendant if they didn't have one. They'd be like, well, let's make something trine to the moon and, kind of thing. So they had a less level of specificity, which I don't know if that is more or less magical, but like I can think you're making the case that nowadays we have better data, and that is better astrology. And I think
potentially, right? But the thing is that astrology was the way that the astrology was developed was through observation. But most astrologers these days aren't observing anything except for what other astrologers said about things. And so,
totally agree.
So to me, with the specificity, we have to turn back into the original scientists. I think this is the integration of moving into the age of Aquarius, is we have access to means that allow us to do better research. So we can we can do better, but it has to begin with becoming original astrologers, researchers. Right. And then as we do our research, we find connections, and then we publish, we share them with the world. Right? And so but that's why I'm saying, but once we have astrologers and then we have astrology books, right? To me, the thing astrology books should teach you how to recognize stuff, right? So that you can make your own, connections.
Right.
Yeah, the culture at that time, I think, is they would sit in the Library of Alexandria and like read a bunch of ancient books. They would all read the same books. And nowadays, what do you know about the Library of Alexandria, Kim? Do you know much about that?
The only thing that I really know about it, that I could say that I really know about it, is where I've read about Hypatia and how the Christians killed her. They basically slaughtered her. They skinned her alive, and she was part of that library. Her daddy, her father was one of the how do you want to say it? Her father was instrumental in that library, she taught mathematics, you know.
Huh.
And so that's the only thing I know about the that the library.
Well, and it seems like they were more localized into this library and learning stuff. And I'm not a historian, so don't quote me on all this, but it's like in the modern day, people have there's tons of astrologers that people get their info from, right?
Yeah,
Whereas the
right.
ancients seem to be more focused on, but Chris would be a better source to really talk about that stuff. I'm not super versed in it, but I do think there was a different way that astrology was transmitted at that time, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
more oral too, or
right,
I think Valence traveled around to learn astrology.
right, right, right. And all that was because of what's his name? Greek. Oh, the Greek. What's his name? Jeez.
Ptolemy?
Alexander the Great.
Oh, Alexander the Great.
Yeah, he made travel more accessible to the world.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about spirit guides and daimons and what and the difference between how spirit guides or daimons fit in with ancient Greek Hellenistic astrology, whereas where they fit in now culturally with astrology. So what do we think of modern astrologers dealing with spirits and spirit guides? Do they? Do you deal with spirit guides, Ricky?
Not really.
Okay. Do you deal with spirit guides, Kim?
Uh, I'm going to say uh, at this point in my life, I used to. Now I don't.
Okay.
So do you mean, do I deal with them in my life, or do I deal with them in astrology when
Like
I'm
in
talking to them?
astrology, do you consider that in your readings?
Not indirectly. I do, but not directly. No.
Yeah,
Interesting. Well,
Now,
now I'm
like I might say, like here's an example, right? If someone is going through a Mars transit, and they stand up to their boss and ask for a raise, I'll say your spirit guides are posting champagne.
uh,
Yeah.
so you kind of
yeah,
use it colloquially, to say the
yeah,
universe is celebrating the situation, kind of thing.
Or that there's specific individuals that are overseeing your spiritual development and insinuating again an evolutionary astrology perspective that the chart only manifests something in your life because it's allowing you to evolve, right? So that the chart and the spirit guides, right, are on the same team
right,
from
Mm.
an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Well, and so in ancient Greek astrology, they incorporate the daimon extensively into astrology, which daimon was a word for kind of a spiritual intermediary between God and a person. So that
right,
became demon etymologically, because the Christians would say
right,
anything that isn't God and is talking to you and that's a spirit is a demon. So that was kind of a weird evolution. But they would say that part of the chart is the daimon. In fact, the 11th house, it was called the house of the good daimon, and the 12th house is the house of the bad daimon. But basically that how we know what we're growing into, how we know our life purpose is to talk to our daimon. And that the daimon doesn't necessarily protect you, but it protects your path and purpose. And it sounds like you're saying in evolutionary, it's a similar thing.
We're saying the same thing, is what it feels like, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I
Would
just
would
can,
would your there is one astrologer I know, and he would use it. Your ascendant is your daemon.
okay.
Yeah, that and I don't understand all that. But
Interesting. All right, let's keep moving through here and let's talk about the highly technical nature of Hellenistic astrology. So I'm looking at this chapter and we've got the balance, you know. Then there was the decans, which we have in modern astrology, but here we have the balance. Then there's the triplicities. Then there's the dodecatomoiria. Then there's profections. So there's a highly technical aspect to Hellenistic astrology. how is that similar and different to modern astrology?
Well, I would say, I mean, there's a revival of Hellenistic astrology, so there are people that are into the technical astrology, but I think modern psychological astrology is not very technical at all.
No.
Oh.
So does that technical stuff, is that noise? Does it get in the way of a good reading? Or like, do the technical Hellenistic astrologers give a good enough psychological reading, or is it just very technical? Like you're in the bounds of this and you're in the I mean, it probably depends on the person.
I think it depends on the person, but I think it's a good example for because for me, I consider myself an extremely technical astrologer. But all of my techniques are, in a sense, like self-created. And I think when we have to learn something that's so technical, we can appreciate how to think technically. And so when we start to think our own way, but we use what we learned from learning the technique, I think new techniques emerge that are more fitted for us to be able to do the integration. I think if you're too busy just doing other people's techniques, you tend to lose sight of how to even integrate them. But I think if integration is the key and you've learned techniques so you can appreciate it, then you can come up with your own techniques that are very technical. And so they actually contribute to the nuance of what you're able to talk about psychologically.
Right. I hope I don't offend anybody, but
We hope you do.
I told one person, couldn't you just put the Bible away for a while and give me your own thoughts? I mean, geez. I mean, and so, but the thing that I compare astrology to is the game of Monopoly. It's going around and around, and so right now, if you could figure out a way to make Monopoly like your chart, I wonder how that would work. I just, hey, I'm just thinking crazy thoughts.
No, I'm getting all the hotels. No,
yeah.
I love your Machiavellian qualities there. Okay, so okay, let's read from book 9 on discovering the ascendant sign and degree. I didn't plan this. I'm just randomly looking at Valens here. So he says, in terms of sign, the ascendant is taken by the date from the sun degree, counting outwards from the sun sign, giving 1 degree to each. The place where the counting stops will be the ascendant in the Genesis, or at least it will fall in a sign of a similar nature. Both day charts and night charts have a hemicircle. If somehow the Moira falls in the day or night Genesis, the place set up opposite to it will be the rising sign or square. Similarly, at night, counting is released from the Moira of the moon sign. The 12th part of the sun must be cast out from a good and harmonious triangle. Anyway, there's so much of this technical kind of just blah, 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 blah. But what I think Ricky's saying is we can be inspired by the technical rigor of Valens, but we don't necessarily use his techniques. But we say, I'm inspired by how he tried technically. And I do think you are kind of a modern day person living this quality with your strongest planet calculation, and you're kind of writing the app, and it's like you're kind of like Valens a little bit, Ricky, in that.
Yeah, I feel like it. I mean, when I read them, I feel like this is the homie, like I get it. Hey, and speaking of that, can you, if we have the time, the way you read what he said about Mars, can you do the same for Saturn? And then can you also tell me where to find this information?
Sure, totally.
The number 1 book got that.
Yeah, totally. We do sell box sets. We made them really hard to find because Valens protects the books under an oath, and so we made them without the covers on them, but I can show you where they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so totally. Okay, so let's read Saturn. And there's a lot more on Mars. I mean, that was just the first little section.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. the star of Kronos, also called Saturn. Saturn makes those natives born under his influence have very little logic, causing them to at times be the type to count trifles, such as obsessing over tiny expenses or to be focused on the other minute details of life. These are the type of individuals to give someone the evil eye, as they are envious of others and hold grudges. They are anxiety-ridden, inclined to beat themselves down, and solitary in nature. These natives tend towards a no-nonsense type of affectation. They can keep things hidden through the quality of being subtle, and in this way can in some ways be deceitful. They can be harsh or crabby, and in certain cases can be excessively rigorous, exacting, and strict. In this way, Saturn individuals can end up in high positions, nodding their assent and approval to those below them in rank.
Right.
Going?
Well, I mean, yeah, please. Yeah, we got a couple of minutes.
Saturn types tend to have a quality of visual perception that focus on the negative aspects of the world around them. They can also tend to be very dry. These natives can also be the kinds of people who are marked by filthiness, neglect, and poverty. The beggars who are clad in black and whom people abhor and shudder at. These types suffer through all kinds of painful experiences and could be quite productive as sailors or other seafaring types. So, he goes on and on.
Well, to me, this is, and because when modern astrology, it's more sign based. They don't really talk about the planets, and so like this kind of language and this kind of writing really aligns very much with my idea of the strongest planet. And as far as like content to get people to read, even the way he says a Saturn person, right? That's the way I talk about someone who's got a very dominant prominent Saturn in their chart.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, whenever I talk about the planets or teach the planets in intro classes, I always use Valence. He is literally the best at describing planets. You should hear his. Do you want to hear Mercury?
Please.
Yeah. Because since you're such a gem. Okay, dude, Mercury is so good. Okay. The star of Hermes signifies education, child rearing, the act of writing in the alphabet, tests, logic, brotherhood, interpretation, the act of being a herald or messenger, arithmetic, counting, geometry, commerce, youthfulness, toys, and games. You seem to embody a lot of these. Mercury can at times also be associated with theft and plagiarism and other ways in which information is shared in common, such as news and proclamations. Mercury rules the act of being of service to others, the act of making a gain or profit, discoveries which are born of much thought as opposed to chance, conformity, contests and tournaments such as wrestling or battle, and the using of the voice in order to sing or make declamations. Mercury can also be connected with letters and seals of approval, the act of standing or hanging suspended, trials or examinations, the sense of hearing and versatility in general. Mercury is a giver of good sense and intellectual understanding. Isn't that good?
It's so good. Yeah.
Thank you. That's my translation. The best translation.
Wonder what a medical astrology would say. What body part is ruled by Mercury?
I bet
medical astrology would say the brain and the nervous system.
And the lungs and the ears. Or the yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the throat, probably.
Right. Well, I've suffered a lot from negativity being thrown at me or me being critical, because I was criticized all the time.
Well, don't you have a Mercury, Saturn, Pluto T-square?
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, isn't that that's no big? That's a no joke. That Mercury in Aquarius opposed Pluto square Saturn.
Oh, I look at it like, like when we study other people's charts, we study also their health, and so that's why I say astrology's sort of fun. It's like I can't think of that name, but that's in Arabic parts. Well, in Arabic parts, that one, the thing that will cause me to fail most is in the 7th house.
The place of Nemesis?
Yeah, your nemesis. Right. And I said, hey, I agree with that. I just should never have gotten married.
How you love Sherry? Come on, you love Sherry.
I love Miss Sherry. Oh yeah, but still,
That's the
I
problem,
still
right?
do what I want to do.
His love of Sherry is his nemesis. All right, well, we have come to the end of our episode. Kim, I'm so glad you brought your magical ass on here. Literally. It's fun to see you and Ricky kind of the differences and just it's just so cool to see. All right, well, Ricky, we have covered Valence. Our guest next week is just I can't wait for next week as well. So, all right, everyone, have a wonderful day.
Yeah, well, show that book again real quick.
Ready? It's found. Oh, this is the first. Well, yeah.
The one. Okay, got it.
Yeah, but this actually is out of print. You got to get the other one. Just we'll email about it, Ricky.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye.